Welcome back Chessbox Worldwide, where we bring you the most brutal and beautiful battles from the top tiers of the game. Today, we are diving deep into round 2 of the FIDE World Cup 2025, an elimination tournament where a single mistake can send you home. The tension was palpable as two players facing off each other have a history of beautiful performances. With the white pieces, we have Germany's Grandmaster Niclas Huschenbeth, a two-time German champion known for his fighting spirit and preference for sharp tactical lines. His opponent playing black is Algeria's top-ranked player, Grandmaster Bilel Bellahcene, a former African chess champion who famously won the FIDE Zone 4.1 championship with a perfect 9 out of 9. This isn't just a match, it's a battle of champions with everything to lose. This was not a quiet positional grind. From a solid Sicilian defense, the game erupted into a tactical inferno. Huschenbeth, playing true to his aggressive style, sacrificed a pawn, then the exchange, then grabbed his entire position on a brilliant attack against the Black King. The critical moment came right here on move 25 after playing f6, a move that ripped the position open and led to a spectacular series of threats, culminating in the relentless push of the Black King. With the clock ticking, the World Cup on the line, one champion found a path through the chaos, and the other could only watch as their position shattered. Get ready for an absolute thriller. Did White's king hunt pay off, or did the African champion manage to hold the line? Let's break down this World Cup masterpiece. Hit that like button, subscribe, and in the white pieces, the two-time German champion, Grandmaster Niclas Huschenbeth, opened the game with 1e4, and the African champion, Grandmaster Bilel Bellahcene from Algeria, played c5, the Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, bishop b5 check, and after bishop defends step check, bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, we see c4, grabbing the center, and this is the Maroxibine, which is the best weapon against Sicilian, e5, and we see knight c3, knight c6, d3, opening up for the bishop, bishop comes to e7, we see short castling, bishop d8, now he wants to put the knight on e7 and then push the pawn on f5. f3, plan to go ahead and expand further on the queen side. Knight comes to e7, b4, and in this position, the pawn on b4 is not a free pawn. Grandmaster Bilel Bellahcene went and played short castle. But however, in case of pawn takes b4, we could have seen pawn takes b4, and in case of knight taking b4, bishop a3, hitting on the knight, and this bishop will be slicing the whole of the board on that diagonal. And in case of knight c6, we could have seen queen b3 hitting on the knight. And in case of f5, remember the rook is putting an eye on the rook which is sitting on a8. So you have to be very careful. Knight d5, we see that now in case of knight takes d5, then the pawn c6 is going to be hanging. That's why after b4, Bilel didn't even bother to take the pawn. He played short castling, and now we see b5, knight comes to d4, knight takes d4, he takes d4, and he played knight e2. But however, knight d5 should have been considered. Now we see f5 from the Grandmaster Bilel. He takes f5 and queen takes f5. Now he's dominating and has opened up the f file. In this position, Grandmaster Niclas from Germany played knight g3, hitting on the queen which is on f5 instantly. And in this position, Grandmaster Bilel went and played queen f7. But however, queen d7 should have been considered. And in case of knight e4, we could have seen rook c8, bishop g5, and we see knight g6, requesting for an exchange of bishops. But however, after knight g3, he played queen f7, and Niclas played knight e4, we see bishop c7, defending the pawn on d6, bishop g5, and we see knight g6, and in this position he played f4, opening up for the rook to become very active in the game. And in this position, Grandmaster Bilel went and played d5. But however, h6 should have been considered. For example, after h6, we could have seen f5 hitting on the knight, and in case of knight e5, bishop h4. But however, after f4, Grandmaster Bilel played d5, pawn takes d5, queen takes d5, and we see queen f3, queen comes back to f7, putting more pressure on the pawn which is on f4. So we see f5 hitting on the knight, knight comes to e5. In this position, either queen g3 or queen h3, they are all interesting continuations. But he played queen h3, Grandmaster Bilel played h6. But however, c4 should have been considered. For example, after c4, we could have seen pawn takes c4 and h6 finally with the playable position. But however, after queen h3, he played h6, and the Grandmaster Niclas from Germany played rook comes to e1, bishop on g5 is untouchable. In case of pawn taking bishop, then the knight takes bishop, threatening checkmate in 1. When Master Bilal played c4, and now we see pawn takes c4, and in this position, d3 should have been considered instead of queen taking the pawn on c4 as he played. d3 was a powerful response, followed by c5. Queen d7 is a powerful move, supporting the pawn to continue and also pinning the pawn, at the same time attacking the pawn on b5. This would be an interesting move and continuation for black. But however, after pawn takes c4, he played queen takes c4. Niclas played the best continuation. He played sacrificing the bishop at the same time wanting to rip apart the king side. In this position, he played d3, pawn takes g7, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, knight f7. And it was in this position that the grandmaster was dominating the position. The simple knight f6 check was winning on the spot, but he played queen f5. However, in case of knight f6, we could have seen king takes g7, bishop comes to d2, bishop d6, planning to bring the bishop to check the king, king h1, a prophylactic move, queen takes b5, queen g4 check, and after knight g5, knight d7, opening up the bishop c3 check, rook comes, queen d4 check, bishop e5. But however, after knight f7, he played queen f5, bring the queen towards the meat. He played bishop e5. But however, pawn takes g5 should have been considered. For example, in case of pawn takes g5, we could have seen knight f6 check, king takes g7, queen h7 check, and after king f8, queen g8 check, king comes to e8, queen takes the rook, knight can come to d8, planning to cover the king in case of any funny checks, queen takes a7, and we see d2. And the d2 pawn is untouchable. For example, in case of queen e3 check, we just play knight e6 defending the queen, and you can't take the pawn on d2. For example, in the case of queen takes d2, this is a lost game. For example, bishop check, and you have to bring back the rook. In case of king going to h1, then the queen can capture the rook on f1, and that would be checkmate. So rook would be played to f2, after bishop takes f2, king takes f2, and I can tell you this would be lost because the next move is queen check, and after the queens are exchanged, and then now the knight which is on f6 will be falling. But however, after queen f5, he played bishop e5, and in this position, Grandmaster Niclas played bishop f6, intending to exchange the bishops, and in this position, bishop d6 should have been considered, maintaining the bishops in the game. For example, in case of bishop d6, bishop c3, bishop e7, but however, after bishop f6, he played bishop c7, and in this position, Grandmaster Niclas played bishop a1, maintaining the bishop on the diagonal, protecting the pawn which is on d7, and now in this position, bishop b6 should have been considered, followed by king coming to h1, and then d2. But however, he played bishop d8, and in this position, Grandmaster Niclas played knight d6. And in case you go ahead and take the knight, then the queen coming into f8 would be checkmate in a few. Bishop b6 check. Since the pawn is blocking the path of the queen, Grandmaster played king h1, and it was in this position, after move 32, that Grandmaster Bilal from Algeria resigned from the game. Thank you so much, and I wish you the best of luck in your games.